Good evening and welcome. My name is Jerry McDermott. I'm the Media and Communications Manager here at Fingal County Council, and I'll be your host for tonight's webinar, which is part of the public consultation process for the draft Fingal Heritage Plan 2024 to 2030. The purpose of this webinar is to explain to you the thinking behind the draft Heritage Plan and answer any questions you might have on it. If you have a question, please use the Q&A facility at the top of your screen, where you can type it in and then submit it for answering. Hopefully we'll be able to get through all your questions between now and the end of the webinar. And if you do want to make a submission about the draft Heritage Plan, you can do so at consult.fingal.ie, and you have until Wednesday, October the 4th to do that. So you've just about a week left to do so. You can also make a submission in writing to the Heritage Officer, Planning and Strategic Infrastructure Department, Fingal County Council, County Hall, Main Street, Swords, County Dublin, and the air code is K67X8Y2. And remember, please make your submission by one medium only, and that means either in hard copy, so write in a submission, or do it online through the consultation portal. Any submission or observation must state your name, address, and, where relevant, the body or organisations you represent. Details, including the names of those making submissions or observations, may be included in the minutes of council meetings and subsequently published on the Fingal County Council website. And remember, no matter what your thoughts are in relation to the Heritage Plan, we want to hear from you. Now, tonight, I'm delighted to be joined by Fingal's Heritage Officer, Christine Baker, who will shortly give us a presentation on the draft plan. Christine will then be available to answer questions that are posted into the Q&A facility, which is at the top of the screen. So, Christine, it's all yours.
Thanks very much, Jerry. I'll just share the screen and hope technology is with me. What is heritage? I suppose fundamentally, again, we have a definition of it, what we have inherited from the past to value and enjoy in the present and to preserve and pass on to the future. I suppose most people, when they think of heritage, think of our tangible heritage, so our archaeology sites, our historic sites, or maybe historic domains like our Gillen or Malahide, artifacts and archives. But it's also our natural heritage. Our seascapes, our waterways, our landscapes, our geology, flora and fauna, and as well as that, our intangible heritage, so our customs, our sports, our folklore, our crafts, our skills, our traditions, you know, what we wore, what we ate. In terms of the plan itself, there is a policy context for it, for the implementation of it. A range of policies, in fact, from in an international level, like the United Nations Sustainability Development Goals, at national level, from the Heritage Act from 1995 right through to the Heritage Ireland 2030 documents. And of course, at local level, it's important that the Heritage Plan aligns with the Fingal Development Plan, our Biodiversity Action Plan, our Climate Change Action Plan, which is currently out for consultation as well, our tourism strategy, our arts plan, and our food strategy, to name a few. I've just picked out a few of the projects just to demonstrate. These have all been taken on under the auspices of the current and previous heritage plans. So just to give you an idea of what's going on. Our current project is Fingal's Food Heritage, which is trying to capture both the food in the past and the present, the folklore around it, our traditions around it, and we're asked people to submit their food memories. And we will be displaying that in a digital format. Last year we undertook the Fingal Thatch project, which was a survey of the thatch structures surviving across Fingal, and also the memories and the photos and the social aspects of the thatch, which we have mapped digitally. There's a video piece and some audio pieces as well on a story map that you can access on the heritage section of the Fingal website. There was a thatch walk during Heritage Week, and you know, the information gathered in that is feeding into a review of thatch at a national level. Likewise, with our Heritage Checks climate project, this arose out of an audit of all our cultural heritage and the climate change risk assessment of that. So there's over 2,200 heritage assets across Fingal in private and public ownership. Everything from landscape to buildings to archaeological sites to street furniture, and we looked at those in terms of the climate risk that is happening now and coming down the line. And arising out of that is the Fingal Heritage X climate project, which is about a sort of giving communities a positive response, an opportunity for a positive response. So that involved developing a toolkit with our consultants and training days, and that's something that's some members of the community have taken on themselves and go out and monitor the sites and fill out the forms, and it's something that we will be updating and mapping in the future. Another one close to my heart is the community-based research excavation in Dromana, our Digging Dromana project, which is our Iron Age promontory fort site near Loch Shinny. And there we have found evidence of contact with the Roman world not seen anywhere else in Ireland before. And these results not only add to the interpretation of the site itself, but to the understanding of this area in Ireland. This is just amalgamation of some of the other projects or community-led requests we've had. So everything from heritage audits, articles, videos, exhibition, launches, tappable signage, heritage guidance, and our award-winning snapshots of Fingal's past, which was done by the Fingal Heritage Network. So in terms of, I'm just going to bring you through the process of formulating our draft heritage plan, and this is something that is very much supported by the Heritage Forum. The first stage was a pre-draft consultation, which took place in April and May, and that was in the form of an online survey, so that people could, the idea was to reach as wide an audience as possible. So it was promoted through public community groups, other organisations, social media, shared by the Public Participation Network, Coordin and Nogue, the Integration Office, my communications colleagues, advertised across social media. We did a video. We also did some drop-in sessions and stakeholder meetings, so in Blanchetown and Bobbriggan Library, in Newbridge Domain, we had workshops with the Heritage Network and the Heritage Forum. So in terms of responses, we got 266. You can see from the graph that they were across all age groups, but mainly, like myself, middle-aged. Awareness and importance of Fingal's heritage was definitely one of the things that people were interested in, specifically the historic environment itself, how heritage can give a sense of community and social cohesion, a sense of place. People were interested in their social histories, cultural connections, the fact that it's often finite and irreplaceable, right through to well-being. A good chunk of people were not aware of the previous 3 plans, but at least 1/3 were aware of the most recent plan. We asked about what people thought were the challenges to heritage. So funding and resources, awareness and engagement, development and climate change were the most referenced, I suppose. We also asked people to identify in the form of prompts, and that they could identify their priorities and themes for heritage, which would form the basis of the draft heritage plan. and conservation and caring for heritage sites, monuments, protected structures, historic graveyards, and the natural heritage sites came out top, which I think is reflected with my other heritage officer colleagues who are also doing this process in other counties. Raising awareness, engaging, working with communities, focus on the local, recording heritage, research, audit, inventories. What came across very strongly, especially in the working groups, was the desire to do practical things, physical things, traditional skills, and to have training. The marine and coastal, heritage-led regeneration, climate change, of course, and interpretation was a big one. Additional themes suggested included agricultural heritage, sporting heritage, biodiversity, coastal maritime heritage, lighthouses, fishing, the Gaelic language, intangible heritage, the industrial heritage, genealogy, queer heritage, emerging heritage, heritage from the newer communities, and inclusion and access for people with disabilities. So the draft heritage plan is based on those responses and trying to incorporate all those priorities and themes. And 6 strategic themes were developed. Protecting our place, which is about the conservation and management, sharing our stories, audits, interpretation plans, the climate action for heritage, all our voices, which is everything from intergenerational to diversity to inclusion to music to oral histories, creating knowledge, again, the research, the audits, the education, and the accessible heritage, which is physical, digital, and beyond social barriers. So I'll just go through in a bit more detail the format of that in the plan. So theme 1, protecting our place, a lot of focus is on both the implementation of existing policy and working with funds and communities to protect, to mainstream heritage into policy and practice, to be inclusive in terms of helping communities get involved for the protection into the future for further generations of our heritage. Sharing our stories, again, this is something that came across very strongly in terms of wanting to share our stories locally so they're not forgotten, so they're captured, to use them as to underpin maybe tourism products, to share them with beyond the place. So everything from heritage audits, guidance, supporting communities in their own projects, and leveraging opportunities. Climate action for heritage, it's not something we can ignore. Heritage, I suppose, is the long game, but we have a lot to learn in terms of going forward, and maybe even remembering some things in the past that will help us with sustainability into the future. All our voices, again, this is to work with communities to co-create heritage projects that are relevant and accessible to what are unserved audiences, to all those different people in our community that are very diverse and constantly changing communities in Fingal, that everybody has their heritage and that their voice is heard. And that's right down to the oral histories and to recording music, you know, to be literal about it. Creating knowledge, again, this is a very important element. If we don't know what we have till it's gone, we don't know how to figure out how to protect it. So it's that auditing, it's that gathering of information, it's presenting that information, it's you know, everything from collaborating with the Conservation Office in terms of looking at 20th century buildings or at elements that's in our public realm, so historic water pumps or curbstones and post boxes, and capturing those so we have a means of protecting those and sharing the knowledge about those. So our final theme is accessible heritage. So again, there's the physical element of that in terms of improving the universal access to council-owned heritage sites, but also to go beyond that in terms of inclusion and having other means of doing it. Not everybody can make it to a site, so can they access it digitally, like this webinar or whatever, and that there are opportunities that are coming along with new technology all the time, and also that there, you know, to include people who might not think heritage is for them, or that their heritage hasn't been seen or is seen as important, that they're given that voice and that accessibility, because heritage is for all. So finally, in terms of implementation, just to give you sort of a breakdown of what it means in terms of take a theme to sharing our stories. So looking at the outcome, just taking one example. So what we'd like to do is preserve old place names and field names of Fingal and their meaning into the future. So action 2.10 is to continue to record those field names and place names and to preserve traditional and historic names and local knowledge. And how are we going to implement that? We're going to revitalise the Fingal Field Names project. There'll be an implementation plan for an annual implementation plan for the priorities for the year ahead, a report on the progress of that. Do remember that some of these projects will be multi-annual, they won't just finish in 1 year, but that there will be, it's important that it's not just a strategic document that sits on a shelf, it's that it's implemented, and that we seize the opportunities for heritage, and that we have the support across community for doing so. And on that note, I'd like to encourage everyone to make a submission and consult fingal.ie. So thank you.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, Christine. That was certainly very informative. And if any of our audience have questions for Christine, we'd be delighted to take them. You can use the Q&A facility, which is in the top right-hand corner of your screen. Just type in your question there, and we'll endeavour to answer it before we finish up. So we have a few questions in already. Thank you very much indeed for submitting them. And one of them, Christine, you mentioned during your presentation the Fingal Heritage Network. What is that?
The Fingal Heritage Network are the heritage societies and groups across Fingal, and we meet on a monthly basis, and the idea is to share information and knowledge, and we have a heritage night during Heritage Week. The occasional outing, we have been to in recent times to the National Museum Resource Centre in Swords, and just to, I suppose, undertake county-wide projects. It's also a means of sharing information, what all the societies are doing, because they're very active in terms of lectures and publications and outings.
Okay. And you also, another thing you mentioned, which has brought in a query, the Blas Fingal Food Heritage project. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. I suppose, I mean, linking it back to the plan, it goes to, it's about creating knowledge. So theme 5, it's about sharing stories, and it's about displaying that, giving access to that data. So the project itself, it's about recording and sharing the traditions, beliefs around our food. And obviously Fingal has been such a, you know, it was known historically as the breadbasket of Dublin. So in terms of its, you know, it's got a really rich agricultural, maritime and horticultural heritage. So we're trying to capture that through asking people for their food memories, good and bad, you know, Jerry, I'm sure you have some that, we all have, the liver and onions, we all remember.
That's
But
right.
yeah.
And tripe.
Yeah, but also like, utensils, traditional ways of doing things, the folklore, the field names, the famine, to capture all that. So we're asking people to submit recipes, their food memories, if they have photos, family picnics from way back, those sort of traditions. We're going to put those on a story map. We have some audio so far. We're also, it's a great intergenerational kind of project. So we're going to be working with schools. We put out a call this week actually to school teachers and have developed a schools pack for teachers, so a lesson plan, and that they will be able to capture a family food tree. So, the kids will be able to draw in what they eat, what their parents would eat, and what their grandparents would eat. And, also it's a great way of including, we all eat, we all have different traditions, new communities, I just think it's quite an exciting project, and we're developing a framework because again, it's such a huge thing. Everything from shop fronts to baking to it's to fishing to it's such a huge thing. We're developing a framework of actions, further actions. So if people have something or they want to see done in relation to Fingal's food heritage, just get in contact.
Yeah, and how important is it to capture, like you mentioned there, the new communities and they're bringing in new foods and new dishes and that sort of thing. How important is it for future generations, for you and your team to be sort of collecting that information now so that you're protecting it for future generations?
Well, I think that goes to all our heritage projects, for instance, the field names, everyone would say, you should have started this 30 years ago. Would that we had, but there's, like everywhere, I suppose Fingal is undergoing a lot of change. So it's important to capture what we've had, that change in process, and, the new voices that are coming in.
And just on place names there, one question that has come in there, somebody just asking, does the name of every new housing estate have to be approved by the Heritage Department?
I'm a consultee in that process. It's a well-established process. They come in. I'm I'm sent the proposals, and we have objectives in the development plan that to use historic names, use townland names, to base them on topographical features so they're relevant to the area. So they're judged against that, and they're either accepted or asked to resubmit if it's not appropriate, and then it goes back to the planner who signs off on it and makes.
Okay, and then another.
Oh, sorry, Jerry.
sorry.
I should say, as part of that process, I do interact with the heritage societies and the local areas to get those views, because that's where a lot of the local knowledge is, obviously.
Yeah. So there's a lot of local input into it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, well, that's good. Another one here, just one viewer wanting to know, I'm wondering how I can get better heritage signage in my area. How do they go about that?
Oh gosh, that's straight into sharing our stories and theme too. So a lot of the actions around that are about heritage audits and interpretation plans, which is kind of, I'm not a fan of ad hoc signage. So getting a holistic overview and approach, I think, is the way to go. There is heritage signage and heritage trail guidance that was developed, and that's available on our website, and I encourage anybody to go and look at that, because the first question it asks is, do you really need signage? The idea is that you develop a heritage plan, or sorry, a heritage interpretation plan. So it could be just that maybe for your area or for the audience you're going for, signage mightn't be the thing. It might be like a sculpture trail in Skerries that's recently been installed, or it might be the digital app for Castleknock and for Balbriggan. That's really, or it might be a combination of those, and it might be a sign. So the process for that is all laid out in the guidance, and if you've any questions, contact me directly.
Yeah. And would you work very closely with the tourism department?
When I get a chance, yeah. I mean, heritage underpins tourism. It's what people come to see. So I think it's very important to have sort of an authentic, accessible, cultural heritage projects. Yeah.
Yeah, and the new tourism strategy I see is feeding into this heritage plan as well.
Yeah. Yeah, there's obviously, it's very important to align these strategies so we're all working from the same page and getting those up. And the Heritage Office is just me. So in terms of implementation, collaboration and partnership is really, really important. So identifying those opportunities and just making sure people are aware of heritage all across the board, in policy, in implementation, and what they're doing. It's you can't get it's everywhere. So let's include it.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And like when you say it's everywhere, one of your big projects and probably one of the best known heritage projects that you're doing is the Digging in Dramana project. And one of our listeners is looking to learn a little bit more about that. I think they're probably fascinated by the fact that this is the sort of the first discovery of Roman sort of a connection with the Romans in Ireland.
Well, not the first, but certainly the most extensive. I suppose what I love, it's Digging Dramana is part of the Fingal Community Archaeology Programme, and we've been, you probably know, obviously, we've been in Swords Castle, we were in Braymore Castle, we were over in Knoll. So the latest one is Dramana, which is the promontory fort between Lough Shinny and Rush. And it's about giving people direct access to their archaeological heritage, in terms of everyone goes, I've always wanted to do this or try this, and it's that opportunity. And we've kind of created a community out of that come back, that are based locally, that come from further afield. And in terms of Dramana, what we have there are a huge amount of finds from the Roman world that have no comparisons. We have amphorae, which is the pottery, and it's coming from the south of Spain 2,000 years ago. It would have been filled with olive oil. So, the good people of Rush and Lough Shinny were knocking back their olive oil, in the Iron Age, which is amazing, in terms of, we know from that they were growing spelt wheat. So, making bread from spelt, it's just building up that picture for that area, and it'll all, ultimately go towards the interpretation of the site and encourage people to visit, I suppose. I just say that all the information, there's a section again on the heritage section of our website. It has the reports, it has a video. That's another thing, getting schools locally involved. So the video we did last year with our digital officer, Mark Braddock, aligns with the school curriculum as well in terms of the secondary school curriculum. So that might be very useful for people to look at.
Yeah. And another project you did with Mark Broderick is our next question, and it's that Fingal's Heritage from Above. Somebody wanting to know when the next episode of that is going to be.
When we both have time. Yeah.
So
after you get the heritage, when we can.
Yeah. So after you get the heritage plan done. Yeah.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
But again, those projects and things.
Do you have any idea? Sorry, Christine. Sorry, I interrupted you there.
I was just bringing it back to the heritage plan. It's because we have that framework for those things at a strategic level, we can do them, on the ground.
Yes. Yeah.
Or from the air.
Or from the air. Yes. No, I think it has been very, very popular thing altogether. just looking here through the questions. Remember, if you do have a question, the Q&A section, which can be accessed at the top right-hand corner of your screen, just type in your question, and we'll try to get through as many of them as we can between now and the end of our webinar. And thank you very much indeed to everybody who has submitted a question. Somebody here now is saying that they're looking for support for a heritage project in their area, and they want to know, who do they contact?
In terms of, yeah, they haven't quite said what kind of support they're looking for.
No.
But I mean, the first starting point would be me, in terms of I can redirect people. So if they're looking for guidance or whatever, as I've been saying, we have a lot of that developed already that's on the website. But if they're looking for money for specific projects, again, it might be just a case of redirecting to colleagues or whatever. So, I mean, the community department, I suppose every department run various schemes. The Heritage Council have a community heritage grant scheme as well, which we can direct people to. If you have an archaeological monument, it's Community Monuments Fund, which I help administer. If you have a thatch cottage or thatch structure or something bigger, the Conservation Office has a Stitch in Time grant and a building conservation grants. So again, libraries as well would have grants for publications and the like. So it depends on the type of project. It depends on what you need, but I would be the first stop for that.
Yes, and your contact details are at the back of the draft heritage plan, so that's an incentive for anybody to go and look at it. You were mentioning that the earlier that the draft heritage plan this year is a strategic document, probably compared to the other previous 3 heritage plans that we've had. Why is that? Is that a sign that sort of heritage within Fingal is maturing, or our approach to it is maturing? Is that?
Yeah, I suppose it is high level in terms of the framework that we're going to be working within, and that's a response to the Heritage Council strategic plan, which is like a parent document, I suppose, for the heritage officers across the country. But yeah, it's also about giving the freedom in terms of actions to be community led. You know, it's what the community want support with and what they want to do. So have a look at the different themes, have a look at the actions we have, where your project might fit in, and we can look then at the implementation plan and when we can do that, how we can do that, what's best to partner with, where does it fit in.
Yeah, and what you mentioned the national plan and that from the Heritage Council and that sort of thing. How much interaction is there between you at sort of local authority level and the Heritage Council?
As it happens, I'm going to Heritage Officer training in Offaly tomorrow. So again, I suppose we have our Heritage Officer network, which is supported by the Heritage Officer Programme by the Heritage Council. So we do have that element of support where we can, receive training, get ideas. We have done the GIS project, I suppose, with the other Dublin local authorities, which is a really, again, sort of regional based project, again, which is supported by the Heritage Council, who also give funding for various heritage projects, including, say, the Bloss Food Heritage Project. I just acknowledge that one.
Yeah. Okay. Christine, I don't see any more questions coming up on my screen, and that's so. I think we've answered quite a few, and I think everybody has had their opportunity to do so. So, one final question is, what happens next? In this, we've another week to go in terms of submissions and that. What happens after that?
Yeah. Well, hopefully we're inundated with submissions and positive or not. and ideas, they will be analysed and presented in a CE report, and then they'll be directed to produce the final plan, and that will be presented to council for approval.
Right, and when do you expect that to be?
Before the end of the year.
For the end of the year. Okay, that's great. Well, look at Christine. Good luck with going through all the submissions that are hopefully going to be coming your way over the next week or so. And you know, well done on the draft Fingal Heritage Plan, and thank you very much indeed for being our guest on the webinar tonight and explaining what it was all about and answering the questions of our viewers. Thank you very much indeed.
Not at all, and thank you, Jerry, for hosting and, you know, everything. Thanks.
That's a pleasure. We're always just trying to keep people informed of what's going on, and we found that the webinars are a very useful way of doing that. So if you want to make a submission in relation to the draft heritage plan, you can do so at consult.fingal.ie, and you have until next Wednesday, October the 4th, to do it. You can also make a submission in writing to the Heritage Officer, Planning and Strategic Infrastructure Department, Fingal County Council, and that's County Hall, Main Street, Swords, County Dublin, and the air code is K67X8Y2. And just remember that you must make your submission by one medium only, so it's either in hard copy or online, and any submission or observation must state your name, address, and where relevant, the body or organisations that you represent, and details, including the names of those making the submissions or observations, may be included in the minutes of a Fingal County Council meeting and subsequently published on the Fingal County Council website. We've recorded the webinar, so if you want to watch it again, a recording will be made later this week at fingal.ie on the heritage page or on our Fingal County Council YouTube channel. So thank you to everybody who did submit questions or comments, and thank you for logging in as well. We really enjoyed your company, and I hope you found what Christine had to say very informative. I certainly did. So thanks to Christine for taking the time to explain what lies behind our new draft Fingal Heritage Plan, and thanks also to our production team behind the scenes who made sure that everything went smoothly. So until we meet again, goodbye and stay safe.